Okay, happy Friday, everybody. This is our 59th automation hour. And let's get the slides moving. Great. So if you are attending automation hour for the first time, all lines are muted. For this one, we're actually going to use the question function in GoToMeeting rather than post to the Trailblazer community. And we will be posting a link to this deck as well as the recording on our YouTube channel and on our website, automationhour.com. We'll also be posting that out to our Trailblazer community, Salesforce Automation Hour, and tweeting that out as well. So here are our upcoming sessions up until mid-May. So if you haven't registered for that, we encourage you to do so. You'll also, if you can't attend live, you'll get the link to the posting after the fact. And if you have a business use case and a cool automation solution that you would like to share with others in the community, please reach out to us via Twitter, Trailblazer community, all the venues to tell us your interest, and then we will reach out to you when we start booking for the next few months. And our free webinar series, we couldn't bring to you without our sponsor, Concrete.io, so thank you very much. And here are your co-hosts, David, Rakesh, and myself. And we're very excited to have Michelle come back on. She's presented a couple of times for us, and she always has cool process automation solutions. And we're very excited that she is presenting about custom metadata types and how you can use that with Flow. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Michelle to take forward.
All right, so here's the question. What screen can everybody see?
I can see your bio.
Okay, so we'll hope it's this screen over here. Are we up to the agenda?
No, we're still in your bio.
All right. Let's try that.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll back up just a second. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm excited to be back presenting here again. As Jen mentioned, my name is Michelle Hansen. I am the Salesforce admin for a software company called National Information Solutions Cooperative, which is why we just call it NISC. I'm also the co-leader of our local admin Trailblazer group, and I was fortunate enough to get to present at both Dreamforce and Northeast Dreamin' last year. So it's always fun for me to do this public speaking, and I know I'm weird, but that's okay. Hopefully you guys can all learn something today. So essentially what I want to do is I want to go through and explain what my company's automation use case is, which is what I presented on the last time I was here, but now we've gone one iteration further. So it's going to build on my last presentation, where now I'm going to start incorporating custom metadata and a screen flow with that instead of just the auto launch flow that I had before. So I'll go through that. I'll show you the process and what I actually built, and then we'll demo it so you guys can actually see it in action. So first off, a little background about NASD. We are a software company or a technology cooperative, and we develop an enterprise billing, marketing, and customer care solution for utility and telephone companies across the country and also in Canada and the South Pacific. So it's a lot like a little mini Salesforce, actually, with all the different clouds, Service Cloud, Marketing Cloud, that kind of thing, where we do the same thing. We've got a customer care and billing module where all of the CRM information lives. We've got accounting to be able to handle all of the business aspects of things. We have engineering to be able to track everything that they have as far as poles and electric lines, or the fiber that runs to your house to give you your telephone and TV services. And so that software suite is what we sell. It's what we develop and offer. So that means that we have roughly about 75 products, and like most software, we have not only a one-time implementation fee, but a monthly licensing fee. So we have well over 150 different products in our Salesforce org. We also have about 11 sales managers. That may actually have gone up slightly because we just hired a couple more. So we've got a lot of people that are selling a lot of software to people all over the place. And as you can guess, the more people you've got in there, the more complicated things become. So one of the things that we ran into with a problem in our proposal process is that we have so many little things that we need to track to be able to fulfill our contracts. And to make sure that we are dotting all of our I's and crossing all of our T's, we came up with a custom object that we call SOS, Services Outside of Standard. It's something that we need additional help on, so it's a pretty good acronym actually. It helps us track anything that's a special request. So if you're moving from one system to another, we'll convert some of your history, probably like 3 years worth of service orders, who has added services, who's changed services, anything like that. If a customer wants additional history, maybe they want the last 10 years, that takes a lot more time and effort for us to be able to convert it. So there's going to be some additional fees around that. It might affect timelines on projects from what a normal implementation would be. So we want to be able to track things like that. We also need to track information that we maybe don't know at one stage of the process or another that we need to iron out before we go to our final contract so that we can actually close the deal as one. Questions like, if you have attachments, do we need to import them from your old system into the new one? How many different licenses do you need for our software? Do you have people working in different departments that need access to third-party software that integrates with our solution? And if so, have we scoped all that out appropriately? So we started to create this, but every time we do one of these deals, every single one of these electric and telephone companies are just slightly different. But there are certain things that happen pretty standard. And so Office Space is always a great movie, and this is exactly how I felt when I got this request, so I thought it was an appropriate graphic. Essentially what they said is, can you just create those for us? If based on certain conditions within this opportunity, instead of us having to go in and hand key it all, which, as everybody knows, data entry takes time, isn't there a way to automate this and make it faster? Well, here is what I built. Essentially, is I took their proposal request that they submitted to our sales operations team. I looked at that record. I pulled the associated opportunity and the associated account. And then based on the criteria in those 3 records, I went through a series of 47 different decisions to figure out if certain products had been selected or certain situations were present in that opportunity. And it could create up to 51 records. Things that needed to be followed up on. So for example, if we just dig in here, we'll take a look at part of this little flow. Apparently I pulled that slide out. So essentially, we have an IVR system, which is an automated phone system. So if they want that software, for example, we need to have our technological expert get on the phone with our prospect and find out exactly what kind of phone system they have, what technology it uses, and how exactly we can connect that phone system to our software. And that is a conversation that needs to happen every time. So that's an example of one of these conditions or products that get selected that every time this happens, we need to have a conversation to make sure we can support what they're asking for. And so put this together, I was feeling pretty great about it because that's the power of Salesforce. It turns me into a superhero. So the next thing I know, they come back and say, well, you know what, that was great and we appreciate it, but we're pretty far along in the process by the time we get to a proposal. And we need to be able to start tracking this stuff sooner. Because I might have a conversation with them a month before I'm ready to actually get pricing, and I need to start tracking this stuff. But again, they still don't want to necessarily do the data entry, and they want to make sure that it's standardized so that they're not missing any pieces on what they need to follow up with. They also said, it's great that you do it based on what we put in there, but we want more control over that. We want to be able to decide which one of these SOSs get created because we've got a pretty extensive master list. So I should just be able to go through and pick this one and that one and this one over here. Well, if you've seen the movie, you can probably guess this is about how I was feeling. I put all of that blood, sweat, and tears into building this awesome process. It goes through, it checks everything on what they're putting in their proposal request, and now they're trashing it. So, darn, it feels good to be a gangster, I suppose. But it feels even better to be able to respond to my users' requests. So I decided after I was done being annoyed that they didn't like what I created the first time, we'd go back to the drawing board. And so I had some new requirements that I needed to figure out how to be able to address. So the first thing is we've got a master list of all of the potential SOS categories that had been basically preserved in Excel by our sales managers. And depending on the type of opportunity it was, whether it was a telecom or it was a utility, or if it was a company that actually offered both kinds of services, we have different opportunity types. And some of these applied in one situation, but not necessarily in another. So the second requirement was that sales wanted to be able to select from this list of master SOSs which ones they wanted to be able to create and to create them on demand. Now, I went, okay, that seems pretty reasonable, but we're all human here. People make mistakes. So how do I give them that sort of flexibility while still maintaining that risk management that I had behind the scenes with the proposal request that said, if you selected a certain product on the proposal, it's going to make sure I create this for you. So how can I make sure that we're not missing anything if I give them the control to do that? I also wanted to make sure that we were maintaining standard naming conventions. By having the system do it in an automated fashion, I could actually control our naming conventions. And it was a lot easier to be able to track and report on what kinds of SOSs we were encountering and making it very easy for everyone to understand from a record name what the purpose of that particular record was. And then, of course, duplicates are always the bane of any database administrator's existence. And having gone through it several times where we had some hiccups that were actually creating duplicates when they would have created them earlier on in the process, and then running a proposal request through the system created all of the duplicate records through the automated process. They really didn't like having to go through and weed out all the duplicates and get rid of that. So again, still wanting me to be able to prevent the duplicates from being created in the system. So I sat and I thought, and I read through some blog posts, and I sat through several of Jen's presentations at different events for Salesforce. And I came up with an idea. And it's kind of a fun thing. I found these cookies with the light bulb, and I thought it was kind of cool to put that in here because cookies, and cookie cutters specifically, is kind of what I started to come up with. Because if you think about cookie cutters, they're a template. So that way your cookies pretty much all look the same every time. You just stamp them out. They're pretty uniform. It's easy to control what they look like. And if I thought about that in terms of Salesforce, one of the presentations that Jen did talking about custom metadata types sounded like this might be right up that alley. So essentially, we had 46 standard SOS records that could be created. It's got the same basic information or directions that are needed every time. So going back to my example of our IVR, our automated phone system, every time someone wants that IVR system software, we need to have that qualification call with our tech team just to make sure that we've documented all of the particulars. So creating that record every time, I need to have the same subject matter expert. I need to be able to associate it to whichever opportunity my sales manager is working with at the time. I've got some basic directions in there that basically say, here is a list of the 5 items that we need to document on this call. Here's the person that needs to have that call as far as our subject matter expert goes. And I need you to basically put all of this information in this SOS so that we can track it when it comes to time to do contracts. So you may be thinking, well, it's just a record and you've probably made one of these records before. so why not just clone it? Well, part of the issue with cloning is that there are certain fields that are only accessible by our sales operations department. For example, we mark these as validated once we've put them in a contract. That way everybody is aware this has been put in to the contract for this particular opportunity. It's been addressed and dealt with, and we can basically check it off of our checks and balances list. So by cloning one of those that's been completed, my sales managers don't have access to all of the different fields that they need to reset it to the basic status of just being identified and needing to be worked through. So that's part of the reason I decided that cloning an existing record wouldn't necessarily work. So that's why custom metadata types came in as the idea on how to do this. I can essentially build a custom metadata type object that's going to mimic all of the fields that are going to be on my SOS record with the data I need in each type. And I can then set all of the values that I need as a new record, as well as making sure that the basic information and directions are the same each time so that we're not missing anything on one iteration of it from the next. So here's just kind of an example of what we had in our master list. So this top one again, this is our IVR system. So if they're interested in that, it's going to ask them to set up a call with a subject matter expert. It's going to show them exactly what information that we need. There's some additional notes. I've got a link to a document that they can access for some additional details as well. So I wanted to pull all of this information out of an Excel spreadsheet and build it into Salesforce. And by doing it as a custom metadata type, I can also put it in Sandbox and then push this over to production after I've done my testing and all of my development, because it's metadata. It's not actual data that I would actually have to load in using an API or the data loader or anything like that, or worse, hand key. So it became a really interesting idea for me to try and implement this way. So what I did is I went in and I created a custom metadata type called an SOS master record. And so the first thing I did is I built the framework of this custom metadata type. So I wanted to make sure that I could split my list based on what opportunity type. So I have checkbox fields that basically indicate which type of opportunity it applies to. And it may apply to one or two, or it may apply to all of them. So I wanted to make sure that I could filter on that criteria to build my list for selection. Then the rest of the fields that I have here, are we including it in a purchase order? Do we include it in the statement of work? What is the naming convention for this? The SOS overview is basically that detail, what needs to be done to document this. And then who is our subject matter expert? And occasionally one industry has a different subject matter expert than another. So I've got multiple fields to be able to handle that contingency as well. So once I built my framework, I started to build my actual records. So this is still metadata, but it's a lot like just a list of records in any of your standard custom objects. So different things that I have here. So for example, if there's an additional company that needs to be set up, that's going to apply in certain situations. So you can see based on the list view, which of those opportunity types this is going to apply to. So for example, meter data management. Meters is something that's unique to electric services. So it doesn't apply to a telecom opportunity or broadband, for example. So once I've created all of my SOS records, then we can drill into one and actually take a look at it. And so, for example, this one's looking at converting an additional data source. So traditionally in implementation, we pull everything out of one database, their old provider, and we put it into our database as their new provider. But as we know, people have data stored a lot of different places. Sometimes it might be in a spreadsheet, or it might be in a different database. Maybe they're using an old Microsoft Access database. So if there's somewhere else that we need to pull that information from, again, we need to track that to make sure that we understand any impact that it has on our contracts, as far as it's going to cost us additional resources and time that we need to bill for, or maybe it's going to affect the length of the project. So this opportunity checkbox that I have down here actually references a field on my opportunity object, which is how I am going to stop duplicates from being created. So we'll get to that here in a little bit as well. And I'm actually going to jump back over into my sandbox environment instead of doing screenshots, just so we can zoom in on this a little bit. So the first one we have here is my initial flow for selecting my SOSs. So, and disclaimer, this is all in the old Cloud Flow Designer. I started this quite a bit before that got released into Sandbox even. So I have opened this in the old Flow Designer, and hopefully this will be the last thing that I have developed in the old Cloud Flow Designer, and now I can move over to New Flow Builder, because it definitely is pretty cool, and I'm excited to get in there and play with it. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to do a lookup of the opportunity, and then I'm also going to look up the account. And from there, based on those two pieces of information, I have a decision to determine what type of opportunity we have. So I've got my 4 options here for telecom, broadband, utility, or multi-industry. If there is any other opportunity type that ever gets created, for example, we do upsells of just, bits and pieces of software to existing customers that maybe didn't buy everything, that doesn't need to go through this. So if that type of opportunity is selected, I wanted to make sure my default outcome had an option, and that's going to send an email and post an error saying that you've selected, this on an opportunity that it doesn't apply to, and basically let the user know that they've encountered an error, as opposed to just having the process stop on them or hang up and they're not really sure where to go next. So the first thing that we do once we determine the opportunity type is we're actually going to do a lookup of the metadata type records that apply to that particular opportunity type. And so the way I did that, let me just open this up here, is I went and looked up each of my SOS master records, which is what I called that custom metadata type, if you remember. And then I looked for that specific field that I built, one that says applies to new telecom opportunities or new utility opportunities. And as long as that box is marked as true, then that needs to populate this list. So I went ahead and put those into a collection. So there are multiple records, and defined what I wanted to pull from those so I had access to it within my flow. So once I have done that lookup, then I'm going to return the results on a screen so that my user can then go through and select which of those opportunity record type SOSs they want to create at that point in time. So from there, then we're going to do a loop. We're going to go through all of the records that got selected. So basically, it's using a multiple checkbox field to create a collection that we're going to loop through. And then based on what type of opportunity it is, I go through and look and see if it's already been added to the collection or not. And if it has, then I disregard it. Otherwise, I add it to a list of SOS records that need to be created. So once I've done that assignment, because there are multiples and I want to make sure that I've got this as bulkified as possible, at the end of the loop, now we're going to go through and we're going to create all of the SOS records. And so for every single one of the options that was selected individually, so there's no duplicates, it's going to go through and assign all of those fields to a record, and then add that to yet another collection, which is where they're going to sit and wait for a fast create. So instead of creating records inside the loop, which if I've got multiple, could very quickly hit a governor limit of only being able to create so many records before I run out of essentially processing power. I added them all to a collection, and then once I've looped through and I've prepped all those records, one fast create is going to go through and create all of those SOS records. Then from there, I also wanted to make sure that I had everything set to not create duplicates the next time somebody goes through this list. And so again, to make sure that I didn't run into any governor limits, I actually went ahead and created a subflow of this that's going to get called to run through my opportunity to figure out which checkboxes need to be selected. And so that's what we're doing in this flow here. So what I've done essentially is I've passed all of the opportunity information and all of the records that are going to be created from my master flow into this subflow. And then for every single one of those records that's being created, we're going through and figuring out, based on that opportunity checkbox field, which opportunity field I need to create. And so essentially what I have is a pretty complicated decision tree that goes through a bunch of assignments. So now again, I will be the first to admit this probably is not the most bulkified way of doing things, but it's the way that I came up with. It seems to work. So I'm okay with it for now, and as I come up with better ideas, this is absolutely something that I would go back and refine. But essentially what's happening is we're going to go through and we're going to do all of those assignments as far as which of those boxes need to be checked on my opportunity. And then once that loop has finished and it's selected all of the opportunity checkboxes, one fast update will go and update all of the boxes in mass. Okay, so that's pretty much how we went through and built the flow. So for now, let's jump over and we'll take a look at an account here. So what I have here is my test account for Anytown Municipal Utilities. They are one of our prospects that we are looking to become the vendor for. And they're a multi-industry, so they offer both telecom services and utility services. So you can get your electric from them as well as your water and your sewer and trash. And then you can also turn around and get your internet and your cable service from them as well, essentially. So I went ahead and I created an opportunity. So what we're going to do is go through this, and it's in the qualification stage, and we've got quite a few stages, and normally we're not looking to provide pricing until about halfway through the process, until we get to about stage 60. So there's a lot of information that's getting discussed in these first few stages, and that's where they wanted to be able to leverage our SOSs to be able to do some of this ahead of time. So if I click over here on our related lists and just take a look at our SOSs, there are a few that have been created specifically because it is a multi-industry municipal opportunity. So I've got 3 here that you can see are already created. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my SOS list, which I just have launched from a button on my opportunity. And because it's a multi-industry, it's going to give me this list to select from. So several things that I might know pretty early on in the process. They don't really like the idea of having to deal with all of the hardware, so they want us to host the hardware for them. They're looking at our IVR system, so we'll go ahead and select that one. Also say that they're interested in our meter data management, and we also need to talk about payment channels. So how are they going to allow their customers to pay their bill? Do they want our mobile app? Do they want a website? Do they need a 1-800 number that someone can call and make a payment over the phone without having to talk to a CSR? So that's all automated. So I've selected 4 here. So now as I hit next, essentially this just goes through both of those flows behind the scenes. So I'm just going to give this a real quick refresh here. Make sure we've gotten everything to populate over. And so now if I go back and I look at my related list for my SOSs, where before I had 3, now I've got 7. So if we look through here, we can see the ones that we selected for ASP are hosted, call capture, meter data management, and payment channels. So if I were to jump in here, let's say to the payment channels SOS, it actually has filled out all of the information that I need. So it's linked to my opportunity and my account. It's populated my subject matter expert, and it's filled out the description so that they know exactly what questions that they need to work to answer with that particular prospect. So jumping back over to my opportunity, on my admin layout, I wouldn't let my user see this just because it's kind of a lot of checkboxes here, but I have all of the checkboxes where these are being created to make sure that duplicates aren't going to be created. So you can see here now that it checks the box for the meter data management SOS, for the payment channels, as well as the ASP and call capture SOSs. So this box has to be unchecked before the system will allow a record to be created. So for example, if I were to go through and do this one more time on my SOS list, let's create a couple of different ones, but we'll do the ASP hosted one again. Let's talk about data conversion. And let's say I forgot I did the payment channels one, so let's do that again. So I really only should have one more SOS being created when I go through and do this. And this is probably the one thing I didn't test ahead of time, so we'll see how things work. So now if you look through here, you can see I have some of my new ones, but it did stop them from being created as duplicates. So that's pretty much the process as it was designed to work. It still gives all of the standard naming conventions and all of the information to my sales team where they need it. It's all housed within Salesforce, but now they have the ability to do it a little bit sooner, as well as it will still go back behind the scenes when they do submit a proposal request. So if they've missed anything or they didn't know about it ahead of time, it will still go through and based on those criteria, create anything else that's needed as far as SOSs to follow up on. So with that, Jen, we can open the floor up for questions.
Sure. So, folks, this time around, we won't be posting questions to the Trailblazer community, but if you do have a question, you can post it within this GoToWebinar. And it could be related to Michelle's presentation or any general process automation question that you might have. So I'm going to give folks a couple of minutes. Currently, there are no. You must have blown minds.
Either that or everybody's taking a nap this afternoon. So, well, while we're waiting for people to answer any questions or ask any questions they might have, definitely if you're new to custom metadata types, I would recommend Trailhead. And I'm also going to shamelessly recommend that you have a conversation with Jen. I did the Trailhead, and I have to admit, when I was done, I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool, but I'm still a little bit lost. So when I sat down, Jen, I don't know if you remember, we had a pretty good conversation, 1.5 hour, where I kind of explained my use case and what I wanted to do, and you kind of walked me through how to build a custom metadata type object to support it. And then from there, this is what got built.
Yep. I do want to note that in the works, and I don't know when it's being released, but Vlad, who is the product manager for custom metadata type, is working with the Trailhead team on a module that is admin focused, because the one that's out there currently on Trailhead is more for ISVs and things like that, which you might not be able to make that connection as to how, as an admin, I could use custom metadata type. So be on the lookout for that. All right, we have 2 questions. Mart says, I don't quite get the duplicate prevention and why a unique field wasn't used for that purpose.
I'm not 100% sure I understand the question, but I think, is it looking for a unique field maybe on the SOS?
Okay. Maybe
if that was the case, I can definitely say that never occurred to me, and that's actually a really interesting idea.
He said yes.
Okay. So that's probably a better idea than what I came up with to do it on the opportunity, because I was trying to figure out the opportunity is the parent and the SOSs are the children in that master detail relationship. So I needed to make sure that I had kind of one place to to track all of that, and so that's why I started using checkboxes. I can't remember where I got that original idea, but that might not be a bad idea to have a unique field on the SOS record and then query any existing SOS records for that particular field. So that's a really good idea. I might have to try that.
All right. Nana asks, can you show the screen in the flow where it displays the various SOSs in the collection for the user to choose from? I've always wanted to do that, but didn't know what to choose on the screen element.
Absolutely. Okay, so this is my SOS selection flow. So essentially, I think where we need to be is the fast lookup, and then we'll go through also the screen. So if I do the fast lookup,
Well, it's two separate fields.
What I had it do is look through my custom metadata type of SOS master records and pull every single record that met my criteria, which is this field, which is applies to new telecom opportunities equals true. So if I pull up my custom metadata types here, basically what I told it to do is look for everything in this column and pull anything where this checkbox is true in that particular example. So from there, then what I do for the screen to display it, open up, is you're going to create a dynamic record choice. And so the way you do that, we'll go through and I'll just recreate one here real quick, is you can create a new dynamic record choice. And so you give it a name. And then what type of data is it? It's going to be text because of what we're looking for. So then you go and you look for your custom or standard objects that you want to create a choice for each record. So basically, each of these are a record, and I need a choice for every single one of them, and it's a custom object. So if we scroll back down here so I can find my SOS master record metadata object. So then I can filter down from there which of those I want. And again, I'm going to use that field for it only applies to a telecom. So I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to make this is a global constant because it's a checkbox, so it's either true or false. So then for what displays on screen, if I flip back over to my custom metadata type here, and we'll just dig into one so you can take a look at it, I've got the label, and that's generally what I've been using. And I name the name and the label the same because I can never figure out which one it is, so it just works easier for me to do that. So I just ask it to put in the label, and then I'm also going to store that label as the value that gets in here, or I can choose the ID if I need to do so, or any of the other fields that I've put on here.
So I guess my stupid question is, I don't know how I did this.
So, and then once I've looked that up, I need to pull the different fields that I want to reference into different variables. So generally, I'm going to want the label. I'm going to want the name. I'm going to pull that in here as well. Which I think they might call that master label, if I remember correctly. And I always add in my ID as well, just to be on the safe side. And then you can add in any other custom fields that you want to be able to have access to as well. So for example, I know that overview field is what I populate in the description, so I want that. And then I would need to build all of my variables to hold that information here as well. So, but we'll skip that for demonstration purposes today.
So Nana's follow-up question was, so is the fast lookup redundant since we're looking it up anyways on the screen?
Yeah, so
No. So what I did with that is, well, I don't know. Is it? I was pretty sure I had to do a fast lookup to get a collection of the SOSs that were relevant. And then based on what populated in that collection of what was relevant, that's what I created a choice for from that collection. But now I'm going to have to go back and dig into this to see if maybe it is. And I see her smiling in the question widget. So that is an excellent question. I will have to I'll have to dig into that. Oh, and I think her follow-up question was, where is the collection? And so when I did the fast lookup, that's where I put it into the relevant SOS records. That's my collection variable for all of the SOS records that I looked up there. Okay, so it looks like I am actually using that collection variable in a couple of different places. Okay, so I think what I did is I looked to see if the one that was selected is part of that collection to make sure it was a relevant choice. So I may have done that as a check and balance just to make sure that everything I displayed should have been displayed and that they didn't pick anything that wouldn't be relevant. So. Okay. So any other questions?
Any questions about the new flow builder?
Oh, right. That was the one other thing I was going to show. If you haven't, there are some settings that you can adjust under process automation as far as whether you're using the new flow or the old flow. So if you go into setup under process automation, there's actually a process automation settings tab. And it's kind of backwards because there is a checkbox here called users can access flow builder only, disable access to the cloud flow designer. So I've turned this off because I started in the old Cloudflow Designer and wanted to finish it off. So I needed access to this. But if I were to check this box here and hit save, this is going to disable my ability to access the old Cloudflow Designer. So instead, if we jump back over into my flow and we open it in the new Cloudflow Designer or the new Flow Builder, it's going to look quite a bit different. So this is what that same flow looks like using the new Flow Designer. So you'll notice that some of the sizes of everything is a little bit different. So my OCD has a major problem with the fact that this is overlapping. The lines are not all straight lines. They curve and they bend and they do weird things. So there's going to be quite a bit to get used to and how it looks. Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty cool to see how you can do this, and it's a lot easier in some respects to figure out how to get the information you're looking for, not needing to know the difference between a record lookup and a fast lookup, or a collection variable or an S-object collection variable, and some of all that. So, but that's just kind of a quick little preview of what old flows look like in new Flow Builder. So, and you'll notice that the save button is actually disabled. When you open it in the new Flow Builder, you're going to have to save it as a new version of that flow. So then you'll have kind of the old flow version and the new flow version as well. So that's just something to be aware of, because that tripped me up at the beginning. I'm like, what do you mean I can't save this? And it was just, you've got to save it as a new version.
Yep, and I know the Trailhead team is working on updating all the existing Trailhead content that's out there using the old Cloudflow Designer. So I believe they're releasing sometime later this month on using the new Flow Builder. So you'll be able to learn the tool by doing Trailhead.
Always a good thing.
All right, so we're going to do a last call for any questions. Oh, and also if you want to learn more about the Flow Builder, we did have Shannon Hale last month come on and talk about Flow Builder. So go out on our YouTube channel and search for Shannon Hale Automation Hour, and you can review that recording.
Yep, and Jen also did a pretty fantastic blog comparing old Flow Cloud Designer to the new Flow Builder. So if you want kind of a side-by-side comparison, that helps me out a lot with some of the just the little things that are part of a learning curve of having a new tool. So it's always a good resource as well.
All right, I am not seeing any more questions posted. So with that, thank you again, Michelle, for coming on and presenting. And we definitely want you back. So come up with something else and then come back and present.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always a lot of fun. So hopefully somebody got something useful out of it, and be happy to come back anytime.
Great. And with that, everyone, thanks for joining Automation Hour. We'll talk to you next time.
All right. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Bye.